You know what's strange about how we talk about money? We obsess over boomers and their real estate. We dissect millennials and their spending habits. We write endless takes about Gen Z and side hustles. But there's one generation sitting quietly in the middle, managing money in a way that looks anxious, contradictory, and strangely effective. And almost nobody talks about them. Generation X. They're the coworker who lives like they're one bad month away from disaster, yet somehow has more saved than anyone else on the team. The person who won't upgrade their car but doesn't hesitate to buy concert tickets. Careful, prepared, and always expecting the floor to drop out. And here's the part that gets misunderstood. Their money habits aren't random. They're not cautious by nature, and they're not bad at enjoying life. They were shaped by a specific moment in economic history that rewired how they think about money entirely. Once you see that moment, everything they do stops looking weird and starts looking logical. Every generation gets a money stereotype. Boomers are framed around home ownership and pensions. Millennials get dissected through spending habits and lifestyle choices. Gen Z is constantly analyzed for side hustles, investing apps, and alternative income streams. But Gen X sits in the middle, almost invisible in these conversations. Not because they don't have strong money behaviors, but because they don't advertise them. They're not posting screenshots of investment accounts. They're not turning finances into content. They're just quietly managing risk in the background. That's why they're easy to miss. Gen X doesn't perform their relationship with money. They don't talk about it unless they have to. And because of that, their behavior often gets misunderstood for contradiction instead of strategy. Until you actually look at the patterns and realize there's a very specific reason they operate this way.
Picture this. It's 1983. You're a kid, standing in line at the bank with your parent. They deposit a paycheck. Same company they've worked at for years, same amount every 2 weeks. The teller knows them by name. There's a pension waiting at the end, a savings account that actually pays interest, and a mortgage that'll be paid off right on schedule. The lesson is simple. Work hard, be loyal, save consistently, retire comfortably. The system works if you follow the rules. Now, fast forward to 2008. You're in your mid-30s. You followed the formula. You did everything right. And suddenly, your retirement account is cut in half. Your home value collapses. Your secure employer starts laying off people who've been there for decades. That moment isn't just a financial hit. It's a psychological break, because Gen X didn't just lose money. They lost trust in the rules themselves. They watched the system change overnight, and once you see that happen, you never fully believe in the formula again. That single betrayal is the foundation of every money habit they developed afterward. Once you understand that break, everything else falls into place. Gen X operates under one simple mental model. Trust nothing, prepare for everything. They don't assume the system will work. They assume it might work until it doesn't. And that assumption changes how every dollar gets handled. They save not because they're optimistic, but because they're cautious. They diversify not because it's trendy, but because they've seen single points of failure collapse. They plan not for the best case, but for the scenario where the rules suddenly change again. This isn't confusion or contradiction, it's adaptation. Every Gen X money behavior is a response to instability, a way of staying functional in a system they no longer fully trust. And once you see that, the habits that look strange on the surface start to look intentional.
Here's the first behavior that confuses people. Gen X is simultaneously the most anxious about retirement and one of the most consistent saving generations. They don't feel secure, even when the numbers say they should, and yet they contribute regularly, automate their savings, and keep showing up month after month. That's because they don't believe saving guarantees safety. They believe not saving guarantees disaster. Psychologically, this is defensive pessimism. You assume things will go wrong, so you prepare obsessively in advance. It's exhausting, but it works. Gen X watched pensions disappear. They watched markets collapse. They watched people who did everything right still lose ground. So they save even when they're skeptical. Not because they trust the system, but because they don't trust it at all. Gen X didn't invent side hustles because they wanted freedom. They built them because they wanted backup plans. They watched coworkers get laid off after decades of loyalty. They saw entire departments disappear overnight. And one lesson stuck: never depend on a single source of income. So they keep the day job and quietly build something on the side. A consulting gig, a rental property, a small online business. Not to escape work, but to make sure there's always another exit. This isn't about passion or personal branding. It's about redundancy. For Gen X, extra income isn't ambition. It's insurance against a system they've already seen fail once.
Here's where Gen X looks especially contradictory. They'll leave a job without hesitation, but stay loyal to the same brands for decades. They have no emotional attachment to institutions. Corporations broke that contract a long time ago. Loyalty didn't protect anyone when layoffs came. But people and products that earned their trust? That's different. A brand that's been consistent, a local business where someone knows their name, something that hasn't changed the rules on them. So they'll quit a company by email and drive across town for the same coffee shop they've been going to for 20 years. It's not nostalgia, it's selective trust. Gen X doesn't give loyalty easily, but when something proves reliable, they hold on to it. This is where the contradiction really shows up. Gen X is financially cautious, sometimes borderline paranoid, and yet they spend aggressively on experiences, concerts, travel, live events, moments that don't show up on a balance sheet. But this isn't reckless spending. It's actually consistent with everything else they do. They learned that possessions are fragile. Homes lose value, cars depreciate, stuff disappears when the economy turns. Experiences don't. No one can repossess a memory. A market crash can't erase a trip you already took, so they save obsessively to protect the future and spend on experiences to make sure the present actually counts. In an unstable system, Gen X figured out that experiences offer a better return than things. Gen X has a complicated relationship with financial advice. They're anxious about getting money wrong, but deeply uncomfortable handing control to someone else. They came of age in a time when self-education actually worked. You could read books, study systems, and figure things out on your own. So they did. They build spreadsheets, they manage their own accounts, they research obsessively before making decisions, not because they think they're smarter than experts, but because they watched what happened when their parents trusted them. Pensions disappeared, promises evaporated, and no one was held accountable. So Gen X educates themselves, double-checks everything, and treats outside advice as input, not authority. It's not arrogance, it's self-defense.
Gen X doesn't see all debt as equal. They're not anti-borrowing, they're anti-chaos. A mortgage makes sense to them. Fixed payment, clear timeline, predictable outcome. You know exactly what you're signing up for. Credit card debt doesn't. It's open-ended, compounding, and impossible to map to an endpoint. That's the kind of debt that quietly ruins people, and they watched it happen in real time. So they'll leverage debt for things they believe are controlled and strategic, assets, businesses, moves with a clear path to completion. But financing furniture, vacations, or lifestyle purchases, that feels dangerous. Because for Gen X, control matters more than comfort. This one looks old-fashioned until you understand it. Gen X trusts systems, but only with backups. They'll use digital banking apps, cloud storage, and online tools without hesitation, but they'll also keep paper statements, physical files, and important documents in a safe. Not because they don't understand technology, they helped build it, but because they remember systems failing, records getting lost, databases crashing, promises disappearing when you needed them most. So they design redundancy into everything, digital and physical, convenience and proof. It seems excessive if you've never lived through a system failure. If you have, it's just common sense. When you step back and look at all of this together, Gen X stops looking inconsistent. They look optimized.
Every habit that seems contradictory, saving but anxious, cautious but willing to spend, independent but always preparing backups, points to the same thing. They adapted to instability, an economy that promised one set of rules and then changed them mid-game. So they didn't opt out, they didn't rebel loudly, they adjusted quietly. They learned how to function in a system they don't fully trust without pretending it's fair or predictable. Gen X isn't confused about money. They're realistic about it. Think back to that kid standing in the bank in the early 80s, watching a paycheck get deposited, seeing stability, predictability, and a future that made sense. Gen X didn't forget that lesson. They just learned a second one later, that the system can change the rules whenever it wants. So they kept the discipline, they kept the work ethic, they kept the responsibility. They just stopped trusting the guarantees. That's why they save like something could go wrong. That's why they build backups. That's why they enjoy experiences while they can. They're still playing the game. They just never forget it's rigged. If any of this felt familiar, drop a comment about money habits you've noticed in yourself or the people around you. And if you want more breakdowns of the psychology behind how people really make financial decisions, follow Alex Capital, because your money habits aren't random. They're responses to the world that shaped you. And once you understand that, everything starts to make a lot more sense.